We are going to start today's session with a conversation with Rajeev Singh-Morales, founder and managing partner of Alma Mundi Ventures. Rajeev, welcome to the program.
Good morning from Seattle, and thank you.
Rajeev, your name is so interesting. It seems like there's a whole story in your name and in your firm's name. Do you want to start with a little bit of your background?
Sure. I could talk for a long time, but in brief, obviously, the name is half Indian, and the Molares is half Spanish. I'm truly a child of the world, born in Europe, raised here in the U.S. and Europe, and have lived and worked in Asia, Europe, and the United States. And our firm was born in Europe, and we've invested in both Europe and the U.S., and we can talk a bit more about that. But yes, I'm a global citizen, which I think more and more of us in the entrepreneurial world are as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell us about the charter and the investment thesis of Alma Mundi Ventures.
Right. So we are a fund that's just over $110 million in our core fund, and then we have a separate insurtech fund, which is about 90 million. So all told, about 200 million in capital. We focus on the Spanish diaspora, or as we say in the U.S., Hispanic entrepreneurs. We are mostly B2B, so we've done some B2C, but mostly B2B. We generally focus on Series A, and I know that the definition of Series A is an elastic definition depending on where you are, but late seed, early A, valuations that are between 5 and 40 million, and we initially put in investments of between 1 and 2, eventually going to 4 and 5 as we do follow on rounds.
And so when you say Spanish diaspora, is it entrepreneurs with companies in the U.S. but are of Spanish or Hispanic origin, or can they also be in other continents or countries?
Exactly right. Our first two funds, which are essentially closed now, but we are in the process of structuring a new fund, are for Spanish or Hispanic entrepreneurs based in Europe or based here in the U.S., and we have 8 companies here in the U.S. Our new fund may have a slightly broader mandate, but we're working on that right now.
So talk about the companies you've invested in. Give us a flavor of what they are and where did they come from? How did you encounter them? What did you see in them that led you to write that first check?
Right. So I think the way I would cut into that is, we have been fortunate, not unlike many communities, there are networks within networks, and so word of mouth becomes very important in terms of seeing deals. And I think that's one advice I would give to entrepreneurs. Don't only look for venture capitalists, but talk to other entrepreneurs and get them to talk about who they've worked with, what funds they've contacted, what funds they've spoken to. And that's one of the better ways, frankly, of reaching the right funds or the funds where there may be a better fit with your project. And that's how we found the most interesting deals, by word of mouth. Reaching out to companies once you've done some research, it's the yield on that, meaning the willingness to talk, is lower. So referrals is really important. What we generally have, as I say, focused is on B2B companies. Our expertise is more in that space, and I can talk about some of the challenges we see in scaling B2B companies. But we look for companies where we can help. I'd call ourselves activist investors, in the sense of we'd like to roll up our sleeves and get to work. We're not simply going to put money in and then wish you the best and give me a call if you need help. No, I'm going to be there to help you in a constructive, in a supportive, and in a positive way. But ultimately, you, the entrepreneur, are the one responsible for the firm. The venture capitalist can't do that, can't run the place for you. So it gives you, I hope, a little bit of a flavor of the kind, how we get to the companies, and we've been very fortunate of seeing thousands of companies literally over the last 5 years. And
talk about some of the companies themselves.
Yeah, we just let me start with one that just was sold. We about 2 months ago, a firm that we invested in about 5.5 years ago in San Francisco, founded by an immigrant from Spain, called Returnly, just got sold to the buy now pay later company called Affirm, which is founded by Max Levchin, and it was sold for $300 million. The story from it started in 2013-14. We invested in 2015 in a convertible note, a small initial amount. What the company does is, as all of you know, e-commerce is booming now. Most people, unfortunately, buy stuff that they want to return. For merchants other than the big ones, in the US being Amazon and Walmart, the return process is a pain point. And so what this company does is essentially enable through software the return process. And when the company started, it was just software, and they had a hypothesis that credit at that point of return might be an interesting play. As time went on, it became the most important part of the business, and ultimately is the reason why it was bought by a firm. So it's the valuations when we went in were reasonably small, under 10 million, and it sold 5 years at 300 million. And so it was an extraordinarily interesting journey. It had its ups and downs, its moments of real challenge, like any company will have, and ultimately success, a good wealth creation for everybody, the entrepreneurs, the venture capitalists, everybody. So that's.
Rajeev, was this company founded in the U.S., in San Francisco, or was it started elsewhere and came to the U.S.?
No, it was founded here. Interestingly, the bulk of the technical team was based in Europe, and so we've seen a lot of companies that are started here, and the technical team is in Spain or in India or in other places where there are extraordinarily high quality talent that with a lot of late nights, if you're in the US, can be managed, and it just gives a competitive edge in stretching the runway, if you will, on scaling the company. We've also worked with companies in Europe that have then come to the US as the business grows in the US.
So this is kind of an interesting dynamic that we see a lot of, especially in the context of Indian entrepreneurs using India as the development location and then coming to market here. Over the years, actually, a lot of these companies are getting started in India, and then if they're going for this global technology or global market kind of play, they want to move to the US, but they do the product development, do some validation, get the few early customers, and then come to the US with a ready product often. This is a dynamic we see a lot of in the Indian diaspora, in the Indian, in the India Silicon Valley bridge. This activity is very prevalent. I'm actually very happy to see that you are also focusing on this dynamic on Europe, because the Europe Silicon Valley bridge was less well built. The Israel Silicon Valley bridge was very well built. The India Silicon Valley bridge was very well built. And right now, it doesn't even matter. Silicon Valley doesn't matter as much. It's more like the US market for if you're doing B2B, if you're trying to sell to B2B customers, the US market, especially in enterprise and mid-market, the US market is one of the most prized markets. So it's great to see that you're doing that in the Europe-US corridor.
Yeah, no, and I think your observation is entirely right. I mean, the fact of the matter is, whether it's Silicon Valley or Austin or Boston or New York, the US market and the buyers here are among the most sophisticated. And if you can sell here, I mean, as the song goes, you can sell anywhere. And therein lies. I mean, one observation I would make about B2B and the entrepreneurs, understanding the buying process of corporates, whether those are mid-size or larger corporates, is really one of the coefficients of success that can't be underestimated. You may have the greatest software, you may have the greatest product, or the combination of product, service. But if you don't understand the dynamics of how the purchase decision is made, you're going to get stuck.
That's right. We spend a lot of time on that topic in our accelerator, is exactly how to set up a repeatable sales process and how to not sell not once or twice, but 100 times and 1,000 times. And what are the dynamics of where you're seeing the European teams? Is it all in Spain that you're working with, or are you seeing other geographies in Europe?
No, we're seeing, we have investments in the UK, we have a couple in Switzerland, and a little bit distributed across Europe, but mostly in Spain. I think the dynamics are roughly similar to what they are here in the US. The trends are the same. Perhaps they lag a little bit in terms of the innovation. Certainly on the financial side, the SPAC boom, for instance, is only now beginning to get to Europe. But in terms of what's interesting, what people are doing startups in, it's almost the same as in the US. And if you want, I can talk a little bit about what I see as the key trends. And
yes, that would be great. That was one of my questions. What do you see? What trends do you see in your deal flow? What trends do you see? What trends inform your investment thesis?
Yeah, and I'm very happy to. As I said, we are a fund that's mostly B2B and also generalist. We don't have either an industry focus or a horizontal focus on a sub process, whether it's payments or whatever, marketing. We're quite broad, so we see a lot. And there are certain areas, for instance, pharma and biotech, which are extraordinarily hot right now. We don't invest in that, but we do invest in digital health, and I see that is one that is really quite interesting right now and accelerated since the pandemic. Everything around telehealth or kind of remote diagnostics and remote healthcare provision in the US and in Europe is gaining a lot of attention because of, we still have a debate as to how the shift that's occurred during the last year will remain afterwards, but it's clear that people are getting much more comfortable in getting healthcare services via digital platforms. And specifically, one of the things we're seeing in the US and in Europe is mental health, for instance, as a growing investment thesis, providing mental health services through these digital platforms. So there's a lot of activity. We've invested in a couple of platforms. One of them is in New York called Rubicon MD, founded by an immigrant, founded by minority founders, and now scaling really nicely with investments from some of the largest funds and healthcare players here in the United States. Very focused on the US, but providing specialist consults to general practitioners. So digital health is one. E-commerce is another one. In March and April of last year, when the pandemic hit, I think there was a lot of anxiety about what's going to happen. But of course, very quickly it became obvious that e-commerce was just perhaps slowed down a little bit and then just accelerated extraordinarily quickly. And so that secular trend, which was underway, just picked up speed. And I think anything associated with e-commerce continues to be very interesting. We don't focus on the front end, we focus on the back end. The Returnly story I mentioned is an example. There's a lot of focus as well on BNPL, the buy now, pay later phenomenon. And e-commerce in general is another one that we see. And then the last one I'll mention is ESG, which is this impact investing, and that's a broad term. And so there's green technologies, but there's also more broader kind of societal impact. And are you contributing back? So for instance, we've invested in one hardware company called Submer, which is essentially, these are what's called immersion cooling for the data center. The data centers are growing and they need more compute power than they ever did. The problem with data centers is that they generate an extraordinary amount of heat and they consume a lot of electricity. So they need to be cooled, which just consumes more electricity, et cetera. So is there a way to reduce their footprint, reduce their energy consumptions? One of the potential technologies is immersion cooling, essentially Think of it as big boxes with liquid in which you stick the servers in, and the servers are cooled by liquid instead of big fans and requiring huge real estate. This company is based in Europe and is selling largely to what's called a hyperscaler. So we generally like those kinds of companies. We've invested in one called Clarity AI, which does ESG scoring for funds. More and more investors care about that ESG component, and this company based in New York and Spain focuses on scoring funds and helping investors decide where they channel their money. So those are three specific. Another one that we also see, I mean, again, none of these are new. They're just continuing with momentum is business process automation. Some people, kind of RPA. What we like about this is, there's been a lot of talk about machine learning and AI and applications of that to the enterprise space and applications of that to industrial processes. We're still in the infant stages of that, but it is definitely picking up, and we like to invest selectively in that, in companies that have very practical experience in using machine learning and eventually using deep learning, AI, if you will, for improving these processes that are in the enterprise and in manufacturing settings.
So, Rajeev, I'm going to go back to your discussion on digital health. It's also, we have exactly the same principle. We don't do biosciences, life sciences, or pharma, but we do digital health. Now, of course, digital health is a big field, and there are lots of sub-pockets in there. The telehealth phenomenon, as you point out, has been hugely accelerated globally, and I think in the Western world, one of the gating items with telehealth was that insurance companies were not really as proactive in paying for telehealth, and they are now. I think the insurance companies have altered their policies, and that has given telehealth a big boost. And in countries where healthcare systems are already immature, telehealth is an opportunity to leapfrog all that. So I think that a lot of that is happening. We see a lot of that happening in India. And I haven't really looked into telehealth in Latin America, but I imagine that's also coming up in Latin America. But when it comes to some of the patient monitoring stuff, which is a very active category, or applications of information technology, especially the AI algorithm kind of stuff, machine learning and so forth, in drug discovery, how do you view the role of the FDA or equivalent, regulatory body in Europe or elsewhere?
Yeah, good question, and I'll be very candid. I am not an expert on FDA and the equivalent in Europe. Having said that, we are working, for instance, with a company that has developed a technology for the diagnosis of sleep apnea, which is a condition that can be quite debilitating if you have it. And I'll give you a quick background here. In today's world, if you are told by your primary care physician that you might have sleep apnea, you need to go to a clinic and you need to get strapped up with a big mask and a big machine. So what these guys, out of Imperial College, a female professor named Esther Rodriguez, developed a little technology where you put a quarter-size plastic device on your neck, and while you sleep, it reads the breathing signals, downloads it on your phone, and in the morning you have your diagnosis. It's much more accurate than existing technologies, and you can well imagine much cheaper to implement because you don't need to go anywhere. You just put a little plastic thing with a sensor in there.
Wearable.
It's a wearable, exactly. But it will be approved.
Does it require regulatory approval?
Yes. It's not an invasive device, but it does, and we are going through the FDA approval process here in the United States. It's been approved in Europe by the regulators, and again, it's a non-invasive device, so the burden of proof is much lower than it would be if it were an implant or something that requires a more invasive device. I mean, the experience so far is, the FDA and the regulator in Europe are looking for innovative solutions. It's very clear that they have more and more experience, and you can directly see the correlation with, if they have some experience with these kinds of technologies, it's a much easier process. I helped one company that's working with exosomes, which is life sciences, which is still in the infant stage, but you can see that there are over 300 drugs in the pipeline at the FDA, and so it becomes easier. So I'm not suggesting that it's a very quick process, but I think that as we see more and more technologies, whether those are diagnostic or the core biopharma, the FDA, the regulators are learning, and therefore they're becoming more agile as well, is what I would say.
So I'm going to probe a little bit on this topic, something very specific. So in this company that you have invested in, it sounds like they have already got regulatory approval in Europe, so they are selling, and they're still waiting for regulatory approval in the US. What is, as an investor, how do you view regulatory risk? Did this company come to you with the regulatory approval in Europe? So if it delays in the US, it still doesn't hinder their selling and revenue generating in the Europe. How do you evaluate the regulatory risk issue?
Yeah, yeah, the time, exactly. I am not an expert on the regulatory, but what we saw in this company was a very novel technology that was underpinned by an incredibly qualified, academic. And so we had little doubt that, as we say in the US, what it said it does what it says on the box, meaning, the claims that it's patented would work technically. The question then would be just going through the process. Whereas, there's some technologies, whether they're wearable or invasive, where there's a hypothesis that it's going to do this, you have to prove that it does that, and then you have to prove it to the regulator through a medical study. In our case, we were pretty sure the technology worked. All we needed to do was demonstrate it in a medical trial in the UK, which we did with patients, and the results turned out to be as we thought, or in fact better than we thought. So that doesn't mean that we will invest in any technology that requires FDA or European agency approvals, because it's a long process, and there are many twists and turns, and you do need some very specialized skills and knowledge, accumulated knowledge of that. So unless we see something where it's, I'll say it, we believe it's a no-brainer that the underlying technology works, we're generally not going to invest in it. And in this case, it was a pretty unique opportunity for us to invest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think there's for those of you who are listening to this conversation and are actually considering or working on digital health ventures that have need for some sort of an approval process, you're going to need to find investors who are comfortable taking that regulatory risk and have some skills and experience and expertise in handling those, because it is a reality in those kinds of monitoring systems or anything that is even a little bit intrusive or invasive. That is a reality, and it does require a certain kind of investor who has that expertise. Always I talk about investor-entrepreneur fit, right? Every investor comes to a fund with an investment thesis, and as an entrepreneur, your entrepreneurship thesis and the investor's investment thesis have to match up, otherwise there will be no funding. So keep that in mind as you are, looking for your investor for the round that you're